Before we crack open tonight's cursed can of content, I just want to say a big thank you to all our subscribers, and an extra sinister shout out to the loyal members of the Sinister Elite. You legends help keep the darkness alive. If you're enjoying the stories and want to take it a step further, hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and consider joining the Sinister Elite by clicking that join button below. Members get access to creepy custom emojis and exclusive Sinister Elite badges that level up the longer you survive with us. It's like loyalty, but spookier. All right, lights off, headphones in, and let's summon something we'll all regret. I never thought I'd end up working night shift at a hospital I was told it was a specialized care facility. The job listing didn't exactly scream monsters, but it did say, must be comfortable around non-traditional patients, and willing to handle unusual cleaning duties. I assumed that meant old folks with bowel problems. Nope. The place doesn't even have a name on the front. It's just an old brick hospital tucked behind a row of dead trees. The kind of building that feels like it's staring at you. My first night, I stood in the parking lot at 11:45 p.m., holding my lunch pail and my self-respect in the same hand. There were only 3 cars, a rusty ambulance with the windows painted black, a hearse, and a beige Corolla with one headlight out. A man with a hunchback and a smoker's cough met me at the double doors. His ID badge said, Dale, but the photo looked at least 30 years younger than the guy standing in front of me. He smelled like mothballs and onions. You the new night shift? He wheezed. Yeah, janitor/orderly, I guess. He grunted. Janitor, orderlies don't last long. He led me through a maze of yellow-lit hallways that felt, wrong. The walls weren't just off-white. They had this sticky, yellowed tint, like the color of a smoker's ceiling. My shoes squeaked on the tile, and it echoed too long. We passed rooms with closed doors. Some had scratched up windows. Something tapped once from inside room 2, and Dale just muttered, "Don't acknowledge it." Finally, we stopped at the security office, which looked like a janitor's closet that had swallowed too many monitors. On the desk was a laminated sheet of paper. Dale slid it toward me. Read it. Follow it. Live. I glanced at the title. Night shift rules. Do not lose this one. Never check in room 6. 2. Don't answer if anyone knocks after 3:33 a.m. 3. If intercom speaks your name, do not respond. 4. Mop up blood immediately. If it moves on its own, pretend you didn't see it. 5. Don't let the patients know you're alive. I blinked. This is a joke, right? Dale didn't laugh. He just handed me a mop, a grimy thing with duct tape around the handle. You're on your own after midnight. If you hear gurgling in the vents, stay out of the hallways. Gurgling in the... Good luck, he said, and shuffled out the door, leaving me with the mop, the rules, and a night full of regret. The first 2 hours were almost boring. I pushed my squeaky mop down the halls, pretending the wet streaks were cleaner than they were. The vending machines hummed. A single fluorescent light flickered like it was having a seizure. Then the intercom crackled. At first, it was just static. Then, faintly, Justin. I froze, mop in hand. The rules slammed into my brain. If the intercom speaks your name, do not respond. I swallowed hard. Nope, I whispered. Didn't hear that. The static hissed a little, then died. I kept mopping, trying to look busy for no one in particular. That's when I noticed the blood trail. It was fresh, bright red, snaking out from under room 4's door and across the hall like someone had been dragged. I grimaced, dipped the mop in the bucket and started cleaning. Halfway through, the blood moved. Not like it was spreading. It slid away from the mop, curling toward the wall like a living slug. I did exactly what the rule said. Pretend you didn't see it. I whistled. I mopped the clean part of the floor. I absolutely did not look at the blood slowly inching toward a vent. And that's when I heard the knocking. 3 sharp raps from the end of the hall. I checked the clock on my phone. 3:33 a.m. Of course, knock, knock, knock. Then a voice, too soft to be human, whispered, "Let us in." I gripped my mop like a spear, heart pounding. The rule was clear: don't answer. The knocking got louder, harder. Something scraped metal against metal, like claws dragging across the door frame. Then silence. I didn't move for a full minute. When I finally exhaled, I noticed my mop bucket was gone. I turned, and there it was, rolling slowly down the hallway on its own, sloshing water, leaving wet tracks that looked like footprints. And then, from room 6, the room I wasn't supposed to check, came a single, wet, wheezing breath. I didn't move. I just stood there in the dim hallway staring at my mop bucket as it rolled away, squeaking like it had somewhere important to be. My first thought wasn't, "Oh no, the hospital's haunted." It was, "Great. Now I'm going to have to chase that thing and look like an idiot on the cameras." Then the bucket stopped by room 6, the room I wasn't supposed to check. The room with the single, wet, wheezing breath. The air changed. It felt heavier, like I'd walked into a room where someone had just opened a coffin. My phone buzzed in my pocket with the time, 3:45 a.m. I had 5 more hours of this hell. Another breath, longer this time, fogged up the tiny window of room 6 from the inside. A pale, hand-shaped smear appeared on the glass, fingers long enough to belong to a piano player or a spider. I decided that this was not my problem and turned to walk the other way. That's when I heard the dragging footsteps, slow, wet, sticky, like someone walking barefoot across a floor covered in spilled honey. The sound echoed, and when I turned my head, I almost threw up. A patient was leaving room 4. I say, patient, but this thing didn't look like it ever had insurance. It was tall, hunched, and its hospital gown clung to a body that looked backward. The chest rose and fell where its shoulder blades should be, and its head lolled forward, almost upside down, with a feeding tube dangling from its mouth. It sniffed the air like a dog, its jaw cracked open with a wet pop. I did the only logical thing. I hid in the supply closet. The closet smelled like bleach and rat poison, and it was about the size of a coffin. I held my breath and peeked through the sliver of the door. The backward patient shuffled past, dragging a single IV pole with it. It sniffed the air again, and for one terrible second, its upside-down face turned toward my closet. The intercom crackled to life. "Justin." I clamped my hand over my mouth. "Do not respond." The thing stopped, sniffed, took a long, sticky step toward my closet. Then from down the hall I heard a faint squeak, my runaway mop bucket, rolling slowly again. The patient's head twisted like an owl. It abandoned my closet and followed the sound. I don't know if I should have been terrified or grateful, but for the first time in my life, a mop had just saved me. I stayed in the closet for at least 10 minutes until the sound of dragging footsteps disappeared. When I finally came out, the hallway was wrong. The walls were wet, not leaking pipes wet, breathing wet, like condensation from a mouth pressed against glass. The tile under my shoes made a squelch noise. My mop bucket was gone completely. Then the intercom buzzed again, but this time it wasn't static. "Room 6. I froze. The rules didn't say anything about that. The intercom continued in a garbled, mechanical whisper. "He's awake." From down the hall, room 6's door creaked open. The wheezing breath was louder now than footsteps. Not dragging like the other thing, but fast, heavy. Something was coming out. The fluorescent lights flickered, and in that half-second of darkness, I saw it. A massive, skeletal figure with antlers scraping the ceiling, wrapped in a soaked hospital sheet. Its eyes glowed faintly, like deep-sea fish, and it was running straight toward me. I've never been the fastest runner in the world, but when a 7-foot skeletal nightmare with antlers comes sprinting down a dim hospital hallway straight at you, you discover new muscle groups. I bolted. My shoes squeaked and slipped on the wet tile as the thing's footsteps pounded behind me. impossibly fast for something that looked like a corpse draped in wet laundry. The hospital felt alive, the lights flickering in a pulse, the vents wheezing, the walls almost shuddering with every thud of its steps. I whipped around a corner and nearly ran into the backward patient again. It just stood there in the hall, upside-down face tilted in curiosity. "Out of the way, weirdo!" I yelled, vaulting over its fourth line like an Olympic hurdler. The antlered skeleton didn't slow down. It plowed right through the backward patient, folding it like a wet lawn chair and dragging it a few feet down the hall. The screams that followed were not human. I needed a place to hide. I darted into the pediatrics wing, mostly because the colorful painted walls felt less like a death trap. Rainbows, cartoon owls, and smiling clouds surrounded me, and for a second, I thought, hey, maybe this will throw it off. Then I noticed the smiling clouds were frowning now. The lights flickered, and their painted eyes began to follow me down the hall. I ducked into a room labeled Storage 3B, slammed the door, and threw my back against it. The pounding footsteps passed by, shaking the walls, but didn't stop. For a long second it was quiet, except for the buzz of a dying fluorescent bulb. I let out a slow breath. Then the intercom clicked on. "Justin, patient intake incomplete." A new voice, faint and sing-song, chimed in from somewhere I couldn't see. "Check him in." I grabbed a flashlight from a nearby shelf and shined it around the storage room. Medical supplies, old toys. Boxes labeled obsolete equipment, do not use. And in the corner, half covered by a dusty sheet, was my mop. I have never been so happy to see a mop in my life. I picked it up like a weapon, gripping it in both hands like a spear. The mop's head was dripping, even though I hadn't put it in water since before the blood incident. The water that dripped onto the floor hissed faintly, like bacon grease. The doorknob jiggled. I jumped back. "Patient, intake." The voice was right outside the door now, deeper and wet, like someone gargling their own lungs. Then, the walls pulsed. I swear on everything. The walls inhaled, exhaled, and the door handle turned by itself. I swung the mop just as the door creaked open. The tip of the mop touched something solid, cold, and wriggling. A shriek erupted from the hall, not human, not animal, something old and angry. The door slammed shut on its own. I was left alone in the storage room, heart hammering, mop trembling in my hands. The hospital fell silent again. Then the intercom whispered one last thing before cutting out. "Room 6 isn't full yet." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sit down. I just stood in that storage room until the first rays of sunlight hit the grimy windows, and the entire building let out a long, rattling exhale, like it was disappointed I'd survived. When Dale showed up for the morning shift, he peeked into the storage room and saw me gripping the mop like a sword. He just grinned with 3 yellow teeth. "Still here? Good. Night 1's always the warm-up." I stared at him. "Warm-up?" He patted the doorframe. "Yeah. If the hospital likes you, it'll start customizing your stay." And then, from deep in the halls, I heard a gurney squeak by itself. By the time the second night rolled around, I had convinced myself that maybe I'd imagined half of it. Sleep deprivation, too much gas station coffee, and an overactive imagination can do weird things. Then I walked into the hospital, and the rules were different. The laminated sheet that had 5 rules yesterday now had 6. 1. Never check in room 6. 2. Don't answer if anyone knocks after 3:33 a.m. 3. If the intercom speaks your name, do not respond. 4. Mop up blood immediately. If it moves on its own, pretend you didn't see it. 5. Don't let the patients know you're alive. 6. If you survive one night, the hospital knows your name. I stood there staring at that last line, my stomach turning to ice. "Yeah," Dale said, shambling past me with his coffee. "Forgot to tell you that part. It'll get more personal now." "More personal?" He shrugged. "Don't worry. If it wants you dead, you won't see it coming. If it wants you to stay, that's when things get fun." and with that he left. By 1 a.m., I was in the East Wing mopping up something that smelled like rotten eggs and bleach when I heard the first knock. 3 polite taps on the glass door at the end of the hallway. I checked my phone. 1:04 a.m., not 3:33, which meant maybe it wasn't the knock. Against every instinct in my body, I peeked around the corner. Outside the glass door stood a man in a hospital gown. His skin was translucent, veins like blue road maps under the surface. His eyes were hollow pits, and when he raised his hand to knock again, I saw 5 fingers, and a 6th curling out of his palm. He mouthed something I couldn't hear. Rule number 2 said not to answer after 3:33, and this wasn't 3:33. So technically, hello? I called softly. The thing smiled, revealing teeth that looked too small and too many. And then without opening the door, it stepped through the glass like it wasn't there. I fell backward on my mop, heart hammering. The thing's voice sounded like it came from underwater. "You're checked in now." It lunged. I ran, but it was already in front of me when I turned the corner. Its body was bending in impossible ways, stretching its arms to grab me. I bolted into the nearest door, slamming it shut behind me. When I turned to see which room I'd entered, my blood turned to ice. Room 6. The room was small, dim, and dripping with condensation. A single hospital bed sat in the center, and the sheets moved like something underneath was breathing. A soft, wet voice whispered from the bed. "Lay down." I pressed my back against the door, refusing to step further. Then I heard the squeak of my mop bucket. It rolled into room 6 on its own, stopping next to the bed. A long, pale hand slithered out from under the sheets and patted the mop like a dog. "Good. Mop." The mop twitched. I swear it twitched in my hands. The bedsheet started to peel back, revealing something huge and skeletal beneath, antlers scraping the ceiling again. Its empty eye sockets locked on me. I did the only thing I could think of. I hurled the mop bucket at it. The water splashed across the floor, and the creature screamed, curling away as the floor hissed like acid. I didn't wait to see more. I threw the door open and ran, the mop clutched in my sweaty hands. The intercom crackled to life as I sprinted down the hall. Rule 1 broken. Room 6 is awake. Then every door in the hospital started to open by itself, and I realized for the first time that the monsters weren't the scariest thing here. The hospital itself wanted me admitted. The moment every door in the hospital opened at once, the air changed. It felt charged, like the seconds before lightning strikes. Somewhere deep inside the building, a low hum started, like the hospital itself was purring in anticipation. I froze in the middle of the hall, mop clutched like a spear, as shadows stretched out of the patient rooms. Long, distorted silhouettes dragged across the walls, twitching in ways the bodies casting them shouldn't have been able to move. Then the overhead lights flickered and went out. Emergency lights clicked on, bathing the hallways in red. Everything glowed like a horror movie finale, and the hum deepened into something that almost sounded like a heartbeat. Bathum. Bathum. I turned the corner and immediately regretted it. A herd of patients shuffled into the hall, moving in jerky unison. Their gowns fluttered like they were underwater. Some crawled on the walls. One scuttled on the ceiling, its head turned backward, drool dripping into my hair as I ducked under it. I ran. The hallways stretched longer than I remembered. The hospital was changing, twisting its corridors into a maze. I passed a door labeled admissions that I was positive hadn't been there before. It swung open on its own. Inside was a glowing white room with a single gurney. Straps dangled invitingly. "Lay down," the intercom whispered. A sharp slam behind me nearly made me jump out of my skin. I whipped around to see one of the monsters, tall, wet, skin hanging like melted wax, crawl out of a vent and stand upright. It smiled with teeth that weren't human. "Dr. Will, see you now." I ran faster, my shoes squeaking on the tile, every muscle screaming. My mop flopped around like a useless lance, but it gave me courage. Somewhere in the distance, a gurney squeaked in motion. I didn't see it until too late. A hospital bed rolling down the hall toward me on its own like a predator, its straps lashed like tongues. I sidestepped at the last second, and the bed slammed into the wall, leaving a dent. The straps writhed angrily before going still. The heartbeat was louder now, and then I noticed the worst part. The exit doors were gone. Where the lobby should have been was just more hallway. I ducked into the nurse's station, barricading the door with a rolling chair. My chest heaved as I tried to think. I could hear the wet footsteps outside, the occasional distant shriek, and, most unnerving of all, the soft, rubbery sound of gurney wheels turning slowly. The intercom fizzed to life again. "Justin, admit yourself. Or we will." I grabbed the phone at the desk and tried dialing 911. No signal. The only sound was faint static and then breathing on the line. I slammed it down. That's when the chair blocking the door rolled away by itself. The handle turned, and in the red glow of the emergency lights, a silhouette filled the doorway. Antlers scraping the frame, skeletal arms stretching longer than before, the wet hospital sheet dragging across the floor. I backed up, holding my mop like it could save me. "Your bed is ready," the thing rasped. Behind it I could see more patients gathering, crawling, slithering, scuttling, blocking every escape. Then, out of nowhere, a loud metallic clang echoed through the hallway, followed by a burst of steam from the sprinkler system. The antlered monster hesitated, turning its head toward the sound. The patients behind it twitched in confusion. I looked down and realized my mop bucket was gone again. Somewhere in the hall, another metallic bang, a valve hissing, and then the sound of water gushing through the pipes. The sprinklers went off, drenching everything. The monsters screeched as the water hit them, and the antlered one stumbled back, smoke rising where the droplets touched its skin. I bolted through the chaos, slipping and sliding as monsters recoiled from the spray. I didn't look back until I found a hallway that looked normal, and there it was. My mop, leaning casually against the wall, water dripping from its head. I grabbed it, panting. "You're the real MVP, buddy." As I staggered into the lobby, the glass exit doors flickered into existence again. The sun was rising, turning the sky orange. The hospital gave one final long exhale, and the heartbeat faded. I stumbled into the parking lot, drenched and shaking, as Dale pulled up in his beige Corolla. He sipped his coffee, glanced at my soaked uniform, and said, "Good news. If it's trying that hard to keep you, you're officially staff now." I stared at him. "Staff? I quit." He shrugged. "You can quit all you want, kid, but if it marked you..." He pointed behind me. I turned. Through the hospital windows, I saw my own reflection, waving back from inside. I didn't sleep that day. I tried. I really did. I locked my apartment door, pulled the blinds, and crawled under the covers like a kid hiding from the boogeyman. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw room 6. The wet sheets, the antlers, the glowing sockets that didn't blink. By noon, I started hearing hospital sounds in my apartment. A faint heart monitor beep from the bathroom, a distant gurney wheel squeak from the hallway outside. Once, when I opened the fridge, I swear I heard the intercom crackle. "My, Justin. Visiting hours." I slammed the fridge shut and grabbed my keys. I decided I'd quit in person. I'd throw my badge on Dale's desk, tell him to find someone else to mop up living blood and never look back. I pulled into the hospital lot just before sunset, but the building wasn't the same. The brick was darker, wet-looking, like it had been sweating in anticipation. The windows all glowed faintly yellow, and for a split second I saw shadows moving in unison behind them, like a crowd waiting at the glass. Dale met me at the door. "Thought you quit," he said, smirking through his nicotine-stained teeth. "I did. I'm just returning my badge." He shook his head. "Don't work like that. You're marked now. Miss a shift and it'll come to you." I wanted to argue, but then a faint knock echoed from behind me. We both froze. I turned slowly toward the parking lot. My car door was closed, but the window fogged up from the inside. A pale handprint pressed against the glass. "See?" Dale said, unfazed. "Already following you." I backed up toward the hospital instinctively, and that's when I realized. The hospital wanted me to come back inside. That night, the building was different again. The hallways were shorter, like the hospital had rearranged itself to keep me close. Every turn seemed to lead me back toward room 6. I gripped my mop tighter. It had become my emotional support stick at this point. The intercom fizzed to life. Outpatient, service, initiated. Then, from somewhere outside the walls, a screeching tire sound, followed by a metallic bang. I ran to the lobby window and looked out. My car was gone. In its place, a hospital gurney sat in the parking spot, rocking gently in the wind. The first patient appeared around 2 a.m. I was in the West Wing, pretending to clean, when I heard scraping glass. I turned just in time to see a pale face pressed against the window from outside the second floor. It grinned, and Spider crawled up the brick wall, vanishing onto the roof. I didn't move for a full minute, then a knock on the exit door behind me. 3 taps. I didn't need to check the time. I knew it was after 3:33. The knock came again, louder, then a voice like water swirling down a drain. "Discharge. Denied." The door handle turned by itself. I bolted into the stairwell and nearly tripped over my mop bucket, even though I had left it upstairs. It rolled ahead of me like it was leading the way. "Okay, buddy," I whispered to the mop. "Wherever you go, I go." The bucket squeaked down the steps, and I followed it into the basement, somewhere I'd never been. The air was colder. Pipes rattled overhead. My flashlight flickered as I moved through the boiler room. Then I heard breathing, not from in front of me, but from all around. Something uncoiled from the shadows, long, wet arms stretching out of the darkness, wrapping around the walls, the floor, the ceiling. A rib cage as big as a car slid into the flashlight's edge. And then, the wet, rasping voice of room 6. "You can't quit. We'll come home with you." I ran blindly through the basement, following the squeak of my mop bucket until I burst into the laundry chute room. The mop fell over and hit a red emergency button I hadn't seen. Sirens blared, steam blasted from the vents, sprinklers activated again, drenching the room. The wet arms recoiled into the darkness, hissing. The massive ribcage withdrew, and for a moment I could breathe again. As I collapsed against the wall, coughing in the steam, the intercom crackled. "One more night, and you're ours." By the 7th night, I wasn't even pretending to be okay anymore. I parked my borrowed car, a beater I'd rented because the hospital had stolen mine, and stared at the hospital from the lot. It was different again. Taller. Darker. Almost leaning toward me. The windows pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. The sky above it was cloudless, but a single black swirl hung over the roof like the hospital was breathing in smoke from another world. I clutched my mop like a sword. My only ally. My stupid, duct-taped, soggy ally. When I stepped inside, the doors sealed behind me with a hiss. The intercom clicked on immediately. "Admission complete. Please report to room 6. "Nope," I muttered. "Nope, nope, nope." I started walking anyway, because the hospital was moving me. The floors weren't floors anymore. They were slick and slightly angled, funneling me toward the east wing. Hallways shortened or stretched when I tried to detour. Doors I tried to open had vanished by the time I blinked. Then the first patient appeared. It crawled from the ceiling vent, hanging like a wet bat, its arms long enough to drag on the floor. It smiled, mouth splitting open to its ears. "Doctor will see you now." I swung my mop on instinct. The mop head slapped against its face, and to my horror, the water sizzled. The creature shrieked and recoiled, smoke rising from its melting skin. I froze, blinking down at my mop. "Buddy?" Your holy water now? The mop didn't answer, obviously, but I swore the handle twitched in my grip. I ran. The hospital didn't chase me with just patience this time. The walls themselves pulsed and stretched, long, wet arms sprouting to block my way. Floor tiles buckled and rose like waves, trying to toss me off balance. Then I reached room 6. The door was wide open. Inside, the skeletal antlered horror was waiting in bed, grinning without lips. The sheets rose and fell with its impossible breathing. Its voice scraped like a wet saw. Time to check in. From behind me, a dozen patients crawled in on the walls and ceiling, hissing and whispering. Check in! Check in! I backed into the room, swinging the mop in a panic. Every time the mop water touched them, they screamed and recoiled, leaving steaming streaks on the walls. The skeletal thing in the bed laughed softly. You brought your weapon. Clever. But water runs out. As if on cue, my mop dripped its last drop. The bucket had been lost somewhere in the chaos. The antlered monster began to stand, its spine cracking, antlers piercing the ceiling tiles. Its hands opened wide, ready to grab me. The intercom blared one last announcement. Final admission. Prepare the patient. I made a choice. I charged. Not at the monster, but at the sprinkler valve on the wall. With every ounce of strength, I swung my mop like a bat. Crash. The valve burst. A geyser of water exploded from the ceiling, activating every sprinkler in room 6. The monster let out a bone-rattling scream as smoke rose off its body. Patients shrieked and scrambled, some melting into black sludge that slid down the walls. The antlered thing tried to lunge at me, but the ceiling collapsed as the water pressure blew pipes apart. I dove into the hall, rolling as the entire room ignited in hissing steam and shrieking monsters. When I stumbled outside at sunrise, soaked and shaking, the hospital was gone. No building, no lot. Just an empty field where it had stood for a week. My mop lay in the grass beside me, still dripping. Dale's beige Corolla pulled up, and he leaned out the window with a cigarette. Well, he said, congrats, you graduated. I stared at him. Graduated? Hospital moves on when it's done with someone. But hey, they always leave a little reminder. I frowned. Reminder? He nodded toward my apartment complex in the distance. In the highest window, barely visible in the morning sun, room 6's curtains swayed. I quit that night shift, but sometimes when I'm trying to sleep, the intercom crackles through my TV for just a second. Justin, your bed is ready. And I clutch my mop a little tighter.